Hey everyone, and welcome to today's Explainer. We are jumping right into a completely fascinating yet totally hidden vulnerability sitting right at the very center of our global food system. Now, we hear all the time about the incredible rise of aquaculture, right? Farming fish to feed the world. It's been heralded as this ultimate food security success story. It's efficient, it's scalable, and it seems like the absolute perfect solution to our growing global protein demand. But as we're going to see, what looks like an impenetrable fortress of modern food production might actually be an intricate, incredibly delicate house of cards.
Okay, let's dive into this. For literally thousands of years, humanity relied entirely on catching wild fish. But take a look at this comparison. Back in 2022, a massive milestone was reached, and honestly, it kind of slipped under the radar for most people. For the very first time in human history, global farmed fish production completely surpassed wild catch fishing. Let that sink in. We now farm more fish than we actually pull wildly from the oceans. It is a total, fundamental paradigm shift in how we source our food.
And to really wrap our heads around the massive stakes of this shift, just look at this number. 3.3 billion. That is the number of people across the globe who right now rely on aquaculture for their protein. This isn't just some niche industry, it is literally the fastest growing food production sector on planet Earth. From developing nations to your high-end local supermarkets, farmed fish is feeding nearly half the planet. On the surface, it looks incredibly stable and wildly successful.
But, and here is where we need a bit of a record scratch moment. Let's look at the actual definition of a house of cards. It's a structure that is intricate but fragile, relying entirely on the stability of its foundation. Because lurking right behind this massive 3.3 billion person success story is a huge secret vulnerability. This booming industry is secretly completely dependent on global geopolitical choke points, specifically the Strait of Hormuz. Now, you're probably asking yourself, wait, how on earth does a fish farm in Southeast Asia or Latin America depend on a shipping strait in the Middle East? Well, let's get into it.
Now, what's really interesting about this breakdown is what these farmed fish actually eat. When we picture fish farming, whether it's tilapia, salmon, shrimp, you name it, we naturally just assume they're swimming around eating seaweed or natural aquatic plants, right? Actually, scratch that. They aren't. They eat highly engineered, manufactured feed pellets. Notice in the breakdown here that these pellets are meticulously formulated from soybean meal, fish oil, corn gluten, and various supplements. These manufactured pellets are quite literally the foundational base cards of our entire aquaculture structure. Bottom line, if you don't have the pellets, you don't have the fish.
Let's move along and see how this builds, step by step, into our house of cards. Soybean meal is the absolute primary protein ingredient in most of these aquaculture feeds. But how do we actually get it? Well, step 1, it starts with Gulf Energy and fertilizer. Step 2, that fertilizer has to be shipped all the way to Brazil to drive their massive soybean production. Step 3, the soybeans are processed at feed mills. And finally, step 4, it reaches the farmed fish. Do you see the incredible vulnerability here? Brazilian soybean production faces immense constraints if that Gulf fertilizer supply chain gets disrupted by any crises near Hormuz. Add to that the whole biofuel pull, where soybean oil is increasingly being diverted to create renewable diesel, and suddenly the primary protein card in our deck is looking incredibly shaky.
Then we have the second crucial card in our deck, fish oil. It doesn't just magically appear at the feed mill, right? It has to be shipped through highly complex global maritime routes. And when geopolitical tensions flare up, these maritime routes are severely impacted. We see these immediate, punishing surges in war risk insurance for shipping vessels. So the very ingredients we absolutely need to make the fish feed are bottlenecked by the exact same maritime and geopolitical choke points that disrupt everyday global trade.
And if the ingredients are the cards, energy is the table the whole house is built on. Let's look at this concept of a wobbly table built on energy dependency. You've got the raw materials, sure, but you still have to process them. Fish feed mills, those massive processing plants, the absolutely critical cold storage needed to keep the final products safe, they all run on massive amounts of diesel and electricity. When global energy crises hit, driven by those exact same Hormuz and Middle Eastern supply constraints we talked about, the price of processing just skyrockets. Basically, the table shakes.
And this brilliantly illustrates what happens when the table shakes. The farmers take the hit. Notice the stark contrast here. On one side, when those global supply chains break, fish farm operators get slammed with a crushing 30 to 50% spike in feed costs. But on the other side, the output prices, the actual money the farmers receive for their fish, remain completely stagnant. They just aren't rising fast enough to compensate. So the farmers are caught in this devastating squeeze, paying massively inflated prices for inputs while just absorbing the losses themselves.
What you really should take away from this is the profound ripple effect, and why this matters so much to all of us. When the math no longer works for the farmers, they're forced to adapt. They reduce their stocking densities, which just means fewer fish in the water. That naturally leads to smaller overall harvests. And what happens when supply drops? Bam! Higher prices for consumers. This isn't just some abstract economic theory. The whole aquaculture sector's growth has been absolutely vital for providing affordable protein to developing regions where traditional fishing just can't meet the demand anymore. When this house of cards wobbles, it deeply impacts food security in places like Southeast Asia, Latin America, and Africa. The fastest-growing protein source suddenly becomes a direct casualty of distant crises.
So the crucial point here completely shatters a grand illusion. Aquaculture was supposed to be our ultimate answer, right? Efficient, scalable, and vastly less environmentally damaging than land-based livestock. But the grand illusion is broken right here. Look at these vulnerabilities side by side. Farming fish has the exact same input dependencies as farming chickens or pigs. The exposure to the Strait of Hormuz? Exactly the same. The vulnerability to global energy and shipping crises? Exactly the same. It is the exact same industrial system, it's just operating under a different aquatic facade.
Which leaves us with this final, lingering thought. We have built an incredible, intricate system to feed 3.3 billion people, but we've built it on a foundation of incredibly vulnerable global supply chains. If the fastest-growing, most vital protein source on the planet is ultimately just a house of cards completely reliant on distant straits and shipping lanes, what happens to our global food supply when the wind really starts to blow? It's a critical question about the true resilience of our food systems. Thank you so much for joining me for today's Explainer. I really hope it gave you a whole new perspective on what's actually on your plate. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I'll see you for the next one.